Hello Game Boys and Game Girls, I'm the Game Boy Guru, and welcome to episode 3 of Re-Unboxing, where I look at all the games that I have and show you everything as I unbox it. As you can see, the chaos behind me is quite interesting. I have a lot of boxes here that I have yet to open. So what I thought I would do, as I mentioned in the first video, is show off everything as I'm unboxing it. It'll be good to document for insurance purposes, and also give me a chance to talk about some of the games that I have. And in today's episode, we're going to be looking at something that these are all games that I've had for a really long time. There's only a handful of them, so what I thought I would do is, instead of just burn through them and make a 2-minute video, I would talk a little bit about each one because I have so many childhood memories of these games. And that is games for the IBM PCjr computer. I've mentioned it a couple of times. It was my family's first home computer. I have an uncle that used to work for IBM, and so he had access to some of this stuff cheaper than what we did. And so we got that, and I actually still have that computer. And now that I'm set up in the new place, I'm planning on getting it hooked up and having it available. I don't have a PCjr monitor because there was a monitor that was specific to that. In fact, we never owned that. All we ever had was a standard CGA monitor that connected to the PCjr. But the PCjr has a composite video out jack, and it also has a mono RCA audio out jack. And so there's also an RF based connector that you could get for the PCjr. The one that my family had died years ago and quit working, but once I discovered that you could do the composite out, I started to use that. But we used to occasionally pull the computer out of the office and into the living room so that my younger brother and I could play some of these games that you couldn't really play on the CGA monitor because they weren't compatible, because they used the PCjr's special built-in 16 color mode. Very similar to what the Tandy 1000 machines had. In fact, the Tandy 1000 is essentially a slightly beefed up clone of the IBM PCjr. And so a lot of the PCjr software works on the Tandy 1000. These, however, I don't believe work because, if memory serves, the Tandy 1000 did not have a cartridge port, and most of these games are proprietary cartridges that were made specifically for the PCjr. So let's get started. First up is a game called Scuba Venture, and this is kind of an endless arcade style game where you play as a scuba diver, constantly swimming upward on the screen as you swim through and avoid obstacles, and then also collect treasure. There's the cartridge. It's a proprietary format, and of course these all come with the manuals. And unfortunately, this game does not have a screenshot in the manual that shows what it is or what it looks like, but this is a pretty good representation of the sprite. And you got your little guy that kicks his legs and flaps his arms underwater to avoid various obstacles, which are these things: different poisonous fish and underwater snakes and whatnot, electric eels, etc., or getting caught on seaweed. And your goal is to get as far as you can and also collect these little red fish and these little treasure chests. Like a lot of early arcade games, there is no end to the game per se. It just kind of continues on forever. You can play 2-player, which is interesting, and that gets pretty chaotic. At least chaotic as far as a game like this. You can play with the keyboard controls. but for most of these games, my recommendation is to play with the proprietary PCjr joysticks. If you've ever seen the Tandy 1000 joysticks, it's essentially the same thing. A large heavy base with a tiny little skinny stick. They are analog, and they are not they're self-centering, but they're analog in the sense that it's not a traditional digital joystick. When you boot up the computer and you start a game, the first time you play, you're not really necessarily playing. You're going to be adjusting the little wheels for your vertical and horizontal axes so that you can center the joystick and make sure that it is ready to go for, using with your 8 directions. And so, anyway, the joystick is definitely the way to go, because the IBM PC keyboards, or the PCjr keyboard, did not have a much of a character buffer. Actually, it wasn't the keyboard so much as the PCjr itself did not have really a character buffer. And so any game that required you to press, say, up and right at the same time, for example, to move in a direction, you couldn't do that. For example, something like King's Quest, using the joystick, you can move in a diagonal direction. But with the PCjr keyboard, you could not just hold up and right in order to get them to move up and right. You actually had to quickly change directions with up and right to sort of go in a stair-step motion. And so, anyway, the joystick was definitely the way to go if you could get it centered properly. But this is a fun game, Scuba Venture. I often got frustrated with it as a kid because I was used to playing Super Mario Brothers and other games at my friends' houses where you could see real evidence of your progression, and like some of the other games that are in here, the levels changed over time, whereas this one just kind of continues on forever. Going back to this now, I suspect that when I boot this up again, it'll all come rushing back and I'll have fun with it. So that's Scuba Venture. This is the only non-cartridge based game. This is Trivia 101, the introductory course. And this is disc based. So, of course, as you can see here, it uses 5 1/4 inch floppies. Now this is not the official Trivia 101 disc, as you can see. It's just a standard IBM disc that's been written on. My uncle had access to a copy utility where you could make a sort of a byte-for-byte copy of a PCjr formatted disc. The PCjr would allow you to boot to either BASIC. There's a cartridge that is actual IBM PCjr BASIC. And then there are these discs that are fully bootable and don't require an operating system because the program code is all self-contained and it runs on its own. And so, like the cartridges, Trivia 101 is like that. I think I've got the actual Trivia 101, the legit disc, in one of those flip-top disc carriers that has the thing where you set the discs in and they kind of lean back against the little dividers, plastic dividers. I think I have the actual legitimate disc in there, but this is what we used because this is what we got when we got it from our uncle, or from my uncle, I should say. I also have the TV and movie trivia version that we played, and this is one of those that when we would hook the PCjr up to the TV, we would play this as a family, and this would be a fun Friday night kind of a thing with us. So a lot of times we would play we would play Monopoly or some other board game or what have you. But this is one of those that we would pull out from time to time when we hooked the Junior up. A lot of times my dad would hook the Junior up for a weekend. We would hook it up Friday night and play trivia, and then my brother and I would sit and watch my brother and I play Adventures in Math, which I have elsewhere on disc, and then typically my dad would do this on a Saturday where he had to go out and do yard work or was going to be gone working or something, and wouldn't be home, and my brother and I could monopolize the TV for all of Saturday and part of Sunday, playing King's Quest and some of these cartridge games. And so anyway, Trivia 101, and I've got the manual here as well, plus this IBM Home Entertainment diskette replacement certificate, which I think by now is probably null and void, but cool that it's still in there. I didn't even remember that was there. And the manual for this one is one of those cool accordion folds, and so it's an interesting game. You can see here you got your category screen, and the little cursor moves up and down through the various categories, and you hit the space bar when you find the one you want, and then when you've got your question, you can see the little timer there, and when someone says they know the answer, you hit the A key, and then they say the answer, and then you hit the space bar, and it actually shows the answer on the screen. If you got it right, you hit the Y key for yes. If you got it wrong, you hit the N key for no, and then it tallies your points because you can put in the names when you first start up. So it's all on the honor system, but it's good fun. The TV and movie game, my parents always trounced my brother and I because we were little kids, and since this came out in 1984, it was referencing mostly stuff that was way before our time, and so we didn't like that one as much as Trivia 101, because at least questions about George Washington and things like that we could kind of get. Okay, so that's Trivia 101. Next up is Mouser. This is a fairly blatant ripoff of Mousetrap that showed up on the ColecoVision and other systems. So there's the cartridge, and I'll pull out the manual here. This one does not have a screenshot of the game, but I'll show you here that you can see the representation they have in the manual, and it is basically a bit of a ripoff of Mousetrap, although instead of the vertically oriented screen, this one is more horizontally. In this one, you run around trying to avoid the mice, and you can push certain walls around in order to redirect or trap the mice so that they can't get to the cheese. And the goal of the game is to keep the mice from getting the cheese. So Farmer Wheatbread discovered a large colony of mice on his farm. You must capture them before they take over, driving Farmer Wheatbread from his house. To help you trap them, he has installed a system of moving walls. You must push these walls to enclose and cage the mice. You must be careful that the mice don't catch you, since you may lose a farmer. Don't be fooled. These mice are dangerous. If you do fall victim to the mice, you have 3 more chances to assist the good farmer. So you can see the Farmer Wheatbread there, and then what the mice look like when they're running around the maze. So, kind of a fun game. This came out in 1983, and of course this says first edition, May 1983. So this is actually an original release of this. But even though it's a ripoff of Mousetrap, it's a little different. Actually, it's somewhat simplified. Mousetrap has a little bit more going on than this game does, but when you rotate these walls, they actually animate a little bit. If I remember correctly, in Mousetrap, at least on the ColecoVision, the walls don't really animate so much as just sort of flip. So if you push a wall down, it just kind of switches. Whereas these actually animate, 2, 3, 4 frames of animation when you do that. Again, the joystick is recommended for this, although this one does work okay with keyboard controls because of sort of the precision that you need in order to make sure that you're pushing the walls properly. There's also a cat in the game that if you go back into a room after you have caged all the mice and you see the cat, the mice will all be gone because the cat will have taken care of them. So that is Mouser on the PCjr. Like I say, fun little game. I had never heard of Mousetrap by that point, so I did not know this game was a blatant ripoff of that, but a fun game on its own merit nonetheless. This is not so much a game, but another cartridge-based deal, and that is IBM PCjr Color Paint. I spent countless hours utilizing this. It's a orange label because it's part of the Lifestyle Family series instead of Entertainment Software, which is what all the games were. But I spent an absolute ton of time with this. And this actually has a standard manual in here with a bunch of information about how to use the program. Of course, there's the example that's on the front of the manual of some of the things that you could draw. We did not have the PCjr mouse, but this worked with the joysticks as well. So I did as much as I could possibly do with the joysticks in order to paint different things. You can see kind of the menu and the layout of the screen. And so one of the things that I did is I would use the joystick and I would draw a triangle, and then I would come back and use the circle shape with the color that I had filled in the background and draw a circle to sort of cut into that triangle and make it look like a sailboat sail that had wind blowing into it. I would draw my boat and my mast and all of that to do the sail, and then I would create a line sort of along the boat, and then again fill the lower point or the lower portion with sort of a darker blue instead of a sky blue, and then use that circle tool, the filled circle tool, to essentially cut out small chunks of that large blue water section with the sky blue so that it would look like the typical waves that you see. So I painted a lot of boats with this application because that was about all that I could come up with. And you can see that's even one of the examples that they talk about is doing the circles and kind of creating sailboats and whatnot. And so I took that and ran with it and sort of did my own take on that idea. It was cool because you could fill in with patterns. You could do the spray paint thing to make clouds, and it was a lot of fun. Of course, you could get pretty elaborate with it. And I used to save these because you can save the images to the 5.25 inch disc. And so I used to save some of my drawings and go back and look at them again later. There's this other booklet here, which is a reference guide that has all kinds of information about the different tools and the different different things like the spray can and the pencil, you know, the text tool, kind of telling you how to use some of this stuff. There's a zoom feature, rectangle, circle, explaining all the menus and all of this. So really a neat program, and like I said, something that I got a lot of enjoyment out of as a kid. I want to go for a full set of IBM PCjr boxed software like this. I'd like to obtain all of the cartridge-based releases if I can, and get complete in box copies like this. And so as I'm doing that, I might see if I can track down a PCjr mouse so that I can go back to this and play around with it and do a little bit more than what I did as a kid. I'm sure that none of the discs I have anymore that had pictures saved on them probably have anything left, because most of those I probably reformatted over and overwrote with games or other things, or my dad may have done that at some point. If, however, I discover that I do in fact have a couple of my old boat paintings, I might see about grabbing a couple of pictures of those once I get it hooked up, and maybe even see about I don't know, doing something fun with it. Next up is Crossfire, for Crossfire. And as you can see, that is amazing artwork on that, on the front cover there. There's the cartridge. But of course, in true 80s fashion, the actual game has nothing to do with the cool artwork. So Crossfire, your mission. A swarm of insects has infested the city you work in as a professional bug exterminator. Everyone else has fled, but you feel it is your duty to clear the city of this plague of bugs. To make your job easier, you have 3 ships containing a limited supply of insecticide missiles. These missiles can be fired in 4 different directions. At the beginning of your mission, you have 35 missiles. For each screen you clear of all insects, you will receive 5 fewer missiles until you reach the minimum of 15 missiles. When you have only 10 missiles left, you will hear clicking sound, a nice typo there, and an insecticide supply site will appear in the city. To reload, fly your ship over the insecticide supply site, which is just that little icon there. Unfortunately, you have no insect repellent, so coming in contact with a bug or its own defenses is hazardous to your ship. You only have 3 ships to start with, so you must take quick action. So this is a grid-based game, as you can see here, and you can see the supply deal right there in the middle, and your ship is this little thing right here above my finger. It's a little hard to see there, but this is an accurate screenshot of what the game looks like. And you move back and forth on the grid and shoot these different bugs. They can shoot at you, and the thing that makes it precarious is the fact that you have a limited supply of ammo, because as you're moving through the maze, the bugs can shoot you, so of course you have to avoid that. But when you shoot the bugs, they can move up or down, left and right through the areas of the grid, and so they can avoid your shots. So you have to be real careful about making sure that you're timing them properly or catching them off guard, because they kind of move around semi-randomly. This is a difficult game, and I remember being fairly frustrated by it as a kid. I had a lot of fun with it, but it could get frustrating at times because even on the first level, the bugs, if you're not careful, can take you out pretty quickly. So this is what I'd like to go back to and see if, as an adult, having a little bit more idea about strategy and, you know, seeing patterns and things like that, that maybe I could do a little bit better at it. And now for probably my favorite of the games, and that is Mineshaft. This is an interesting game. Again, there's the cartridge. This is an interesting game where you drive around this sort of mine shaft mining tank thing and try to grab gems and things like that. And you have to either avoid or destroy some mining robots that are in there, because your job is to gather all the gemstones and whatnot and avoid these robots that are actually doing the work, or shoot them and take them out. Trouble! This mine has been nothing but trouble. Ever since your mining car drilled into that underground stream, everything seems to have gone wrong. Your team of robot miners, which were once untiring, dependable workers, have been short-circuited by the floodwaters. The gatherers, the first robots to be damaged, were clearing the debris left in front of your laser-equipped mining car when the flood began. The maintainers, automated service and repair robots, arrived promptly, only to become the next victims. The floodwaters rose to such a high level that even the long-legged high steppers, whose purpose is to reach out-of-the-way places, were short-circuited. So because the robots were short-circuited, they will attack you. So of course, like any single-screen arcade game, you cannot touch the enemies, or obstacles, I'll call them. And you have to take them out, shoot them, and collect all the gemstones. So again, this is a screenshot of what the game looks like, and it's pretty good. You can see the little mine car there at the top left, and you run around the maze and try to avoid the enemies, shoot them when you can. They'll move back and forth, and like Crossfire, they'll sometimes avoid your shots. And you try to collect all the gems in the level, and once you do, then you get to move on to the next stage. This was probably my favorite of the games that we had. It required a bit of strategy. You had to be careful, especially because some of these goofy angled passageways that you had to kind of move back and forth and sort of stair step with the joystick in order to get through those things and make that all work. And so some of those were difficult to navigate. The other thing is, if I'm remembering correctly, every time you shoot a robot, the rest of the robots start to move faster. So as much as you can, you want to avoid shooting the robots so that you can move through the level and gather the gemstones. But if you have to shoot one, like I say, if I'm remembering correctly, each time you do, they move a little bit faster, which just makes the level that much more frenetic and difficult to get through. So it's a pretty cool game. If I can get myself set up with some ability to stream, this is one I'd like to stream, because it's such a fun and interesting game, and really does a good job of replicating that kind of frantic experience that a lot of the early single-screen arcade games had. And so I really like this game, and like I said, it was probably the one I spent the most time with as a kid. And of course, this was a promo copy that the store had, a demo version that eventually they sold. But yeah, this is the one that I spent the most time with and probably had the most fun with overall. So that is my IBM PCjr collection. What do you guys think? Did any of you have either an IBM PCjr or a Tandy 1000 and play any of those games? I've got a couple of other things that I'll show off later when I get that flip-top disc container out. And I also have a boxed PCjr long box game that is not one of these clamshells, but actually a proper cardboard box, and it's one that is PCjr and Tandy 1000 compatible. I've shown it off in a previous pickups video, but as I'm getting stuff out, I'll show it off here again. So anyway, what do you guys think? Would you like to see me either stream or record footage of any of these games? They're cool, classic early computer games, very reminiscent of early arcade games. So any of you major retro heads that are as old as I am, late 30s, early 40s, might appreciate these because it's probably something that a lot of you have never seen, since the IBM PCjr wasn't super popular. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at GameBoyGuru. Check out my blog, GameBoyGuru.blogspot.com. And also make sure you check out Nira and his channel, which is linked below in the description. He created the intro music to the channel, the awesome guitar cover of the Super Mario Land first stage overworld. And also make sure to check out all of the excellent game music and chiptune covers on his channel as well. Thanks for watching, thanks for playing, and game on!